Hi 3DMJers, this is Andrea Valdez, and you are listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by Eric Helms and Jeff Alberts as we talk about the recovery diet phase. In particular, we're discussing things that happen immediately after you get off the bodybuilding stage. So, like, anywhere from the celebratory dinner that evening through the weeks, months, or in some cases years following the competition season till you are fully healed and recovered. So if you want the exact general prescription for what we do with our own 3D athletes immediately following their last show of the season, we actually have a free half-hour video about that on our YouTube channel already. So please feel free to head over there and check it out. Or you can find links to that video and anything else we discuss in our episodes at 3dmusclejourney.com. But within the next hour and a half, we kind of dive further into our personal post-contest seasons, like the meals, the weight gain, the disordered eating, and all that stuff. We also discuss a ton of the ways that we've continued to get better at those things over the years and some things that we still need to work on. But the bulk of this conversation actually dives a lot into kind of the general factors affecting that post-contest recovery phase, such as body fat distribution, libido for men and women, relationships with food, psychological distractions from weight gain, the amount of weight one should expect to put on, how the reason for you competing affects the way that you recover, and how we judge when someone is or isn't fully recovered and ready to begin their extended off season. So I really hope you guys like this one. Here is the recovery diet with Eric Helms and Jeff Alberts. Oh, hey.
Yeah.
Let's start
Can
the
we
podcast
do a lot of
there.
that in this podcast?
Yeah, let's start the podcast there. How are you recovering from that burp? Do you feel recovered from that burp?
Well, I took it relatively aggressive, but I didn't come out of the gates too fast. You know, I definitely didn't do a reverse out of it. So.
Okay.
That was a little
good segue.
That was a short but kind of intense burp.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It didn't have that long
hint, if you will.
It, where it's like,
here's the thing: when you get a big burp out like that, then you're less likely to have these little mini burps like for the next 5 minutes, and you're just kind of like, man, I spent this whole hour burping, and I could have just burped right at the start and then been fine and had a much more healthy kind of gastrointestinal relationship with myself.
Okay. I hope everyone knows that none of that mattered worth a shit.
Oh, hey. How you burp's important.
Okay. Not as important as recovery diets, though.
Well, it's not the outcome, but it is the journey of your burps. I think we should do the podcast on burps only. It's just
burps only? Let's see how long we can carry this out.
Second half will be on. Never mind. I'm not going to say it.
The second half will be on
farting?
The other side. You know, the other side. Yeah,
gotcha.
The other side.
Yeah.
Okay. I like this topic because it's the hardest part for me as an athlete, right? Prep's easy for me. It's the other side of it that's, and I'm finding out that that's actually not that uncommon as I've been coaching more.
You're not alone at all.
Yeah, for sure. I think it'd be fun though to start with how much weight have either of you guys gained immediately post contest within 48 hours? I think Eric wins this one.
I win the 2 month. I win the 2 month. I don't know if I win the.
Okay.
I think I might have the 2 days.
Okay, tell me about it.
I want to say it was in '99. After that season, I gained. We went to my ex-wife and I went to Carmel, and I think I ate we went to an Italian restaurant. I ordered that dinner and I had a ton of bread with it, and then I ordered one to go so I could take it back to the room.
So you had an Italian dinner
after those two. Yeah,
took one with
pasta. It was fettuccine alfredo with a ton of bread. So it was just loaded with carbs and fat. But and then I had sweets and all that stuff over the weekend. I gained 17 pounds in 2 days.
Ew.
Got you.
That was, okay.
18,
got
right?
me.
18?
18.
No, maybe it was 19.
Oh, mine was 20.
No, it was 17. Eric got me by a pound.
That's that I compete heavier, so as a percentage, you won.
Yeah. But over the span of the week, it was probably like 20, 21 pounds, like a week span.
Jesus.
Yeah, I think your weight gain has a better Wilks score than mine, though. So.
Tell me about yours, Holmes.
Definitely, all of my horror stories go from my first season. Most of them. But yeah, so did my show, and then had all you can eat. Well, first I just ate all the rest of the food I had, and like competitors were passing each other around stuff, at finals, and we're just eating stuff because if we're done waiting around,
Mm-hmm.
And then we went to Denny's up there with my dad, my mom, my stepmom, and I ate my meal and an appetizer and a dessert and Barb's meal. My wife, she was there too, of course. And then I was like, if anyone else wants to, and my dad physically stopped me. I was like taking a plate for my mom, and he's like, no, son, I think you need to stop. I was like, okay, all right. So then as we say bye, I go and get a Kit Kat from the, whatever the gas station was that we were at. And then Barb and I are driving back, because I did my show in the Bay Area, and we lived in Sacramento.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm driving, I'm so amped up, I'm ready to go, right? And talking about, like, this show's amazing, bodybuilding's amazing, that's great, And she's like, right, and she falls asleep. And then I drive while she's asleep, and she does wake up, of course. While she's asleep, I'm like, I'm going to go to Jack in the Box. And stop at Jack in the Box, and I get 5-piece egg roll, a taco, Oreo cookie shake, and a breakfast jack. And I actually couldn't even get through it all. I left the egg rolls and the taco for the next day, but I woke up pretty heavy.
I think it's crazy that y'all weighed in. I would have been like, you know what, this is probably not the best thing to step on a scale at this point, wearing 3 extra meals.
It's kind of like when you weigh yourself after you poop, and you like, man, that was big. I want to know how much that was,
I've seen, I saw that there's a thing now that there's a toilet seat that you sit on, it like weighs you before and after, so you know exactly how much it weighed, just so you know. I'll link you to it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I know what I'm doing.
My athletes need to have one of those now. That's a prerequisite.
I have a new cell on the spreadsheet.
Exactly.
For poop weight.
Morning poop weight.
Dude, in prep, that would be like an ounce for me. I barely poop in prep.
I poop like every other day.
Yeah.
But
at a certain point.
Like when I weighed myself though, Andrea, it was you have to remember back in '99. Like then it wasn't like, oh, I got a reverse diet, or I got a recovery diet. It was, who gives a shit? Season's over. I need to get big for next season. Oh. So the mentality and at least the knowledge I was exposed to back then, it just wasn't there for me.
Yeah.
So to me, it didn't, like, if I got on, it didn't like bother me. It wasn't like, oh yeah, okay, whatever. This sucks. It was just like, okay, let's get in there and train.
Word. I think
also just for the listeners, because I know some people aren't experienced with that kind of weight gain and what it means. More than half of that's water retention.
Yeah.
So it's that it's not that we ate 18 pounds worth of calorie surplus or even weight of the food. It's just that because of that massive sodium spike, carbohydrate spike, that our body starts retaining more of the water we're drinking, which weighs a lot.
Yeah. That's something that go ahead.
Yeah, after that week was over, it was like, I gained 17 to 20 pounds or whatever, but it was like Eric said, like half of that kind of dissipated in the next couple of weeks. Once I stopped the binging, I was like, okay, now it's like I'm getting back more toward normal weight.
I didn't stop. It just was like, this will start as water, and now it's body fat.
Can I tell you all mine? Because Brandon threw up, actually.
Yes.
I think if I don't tell him to edit this part, he might skip it. So we're going to hope that. But so after my last show in SoCal, we were at Hermosa Beach, and I wanted pizza real bad. And so we went to BJ's, and while I was waiting for my pizza, I needed something. And I at least tried. I was like, I'm going to start with the salad because it's like fibrous and filling or whatever. So maybe I won't eat the whole pizza, but like if I do, it's okay. So I got my salad, ate the whole fucking thing in like 2 seconds. Medium pizza. And Brandon was like, what do we want to get? I'm like, well, I'm getting a medium pizza. He's like, well, we get a large, we could share. I was like, no, I'm getting a medium pizza. And so he got one too. Yeah, so we got our own separate ones. I ate mine, whole thing. Mind you, I was 118 pounds. I ate the whole fucking medium pizza from BJ's. Not even the thin one. Brandon ate...
That's thick.
Yeah.
The crust is thick on those things.
I think he finished his too, but like 20 minutes later while I was eating my Physique, and I finished that too. Actually, we might have shared that.
For those not aware of Physiques, that is a pizza cookie.
Yes. It is a large cookie with a dump of ice cream and whipped cream. It's delicious. Just probably the most delicious thing in the world at that time. And so then we leave the restaurant and we're almost at the car, and Brandon puts his leftovers on the top, runs to the side, and just projectile vomits. I was like walking to the car or whatever. I'm like, again, like Eric, I was like, I feel great. I get there and he's like, hold on, puts his pizza on the hood, goes and vomits. Security guards driving by at the same time, and someone's like, oh shit, because he like flew out. So anyways, I think he was just so excited to keep up with me, and then he ended up throwing up everywhere, and I was like, fine.
Just to clarify, had he competed?
No.
So,
yeah, I should actually say that it was. No,
right?
I think it was. He was probably just looking at this little Mexican girl like, I can do that too, and then like couldn't, because he wasn't in a 12 month deficit. So whatever. Oh. And then we went to Krispy Kreme on the way to the hotel because I wasn't done, and I was done with my season.
This ridiculous sport. You're not drinking your boyfriend on the table. You're eating him under the table until he throws up.
Right.
He vomited everywhere. He was like, probably a bad idea. So then, but we went to Krispy Kreme, and I was like, my eyes were still, I was like, I want one of those and one of those. So we took home like this box of like 6 or 7 of them. And we get to the hotel, and mind you, Brandon and I had just started dating, so this is our first time staying in a hotel together. And I was like, hey, right? But then he went to the shower. I took a few bites of the donuts because I could only take like 1 bite of each. I couldn't eat all of them. I was getting too full. He comes out, and I'm over here. This is our first night in a hotel together. He comes out, and I'm sitting like this in the bed. And he was like, you okay? I was like, I can't move. And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, no, like I'll vomit or something. I can't move. So I just like sat upright watching TV for our first night in a hotel that we thought would be romantic. And I was like, I can't move. I'm going to throw up everywhere. And that's how it went until I passed out.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I also couldn't have intimacy with my wife after eating like that. Because if you're the male, you're doing a little more moving. There's a lot of sloshing going around, and you're just like, this can't happen. You probably get a hernia or something.
Or I would have thrown up all over him. But anyways, so that was how mine. But I wasn't gonna weigh in. I didn't weigh in until probably 4 days later because I knew that would have just been such a mind fuck. Anyways, so about how that was not a great idea for any of us. However, we do allow for that, right? In the recovery diet, not to the point of not moving.
Allow for that. No, I would say allow for that.
We allow for So the premise
enjoying yourself the night of the show.
Enjoying yourself.
I got past the point of enjoyment. It sounds like we all got past the point of enjoying ourselves.
We hated ourselves probably for a little bit there.
Yeah, I think that's probably a little too far.
Yeah. And I didn't do that after every show, and obviously you guys have done more shows than me. That was the only show end of that season.
Got better.
What would you say the reason why we did that though? Like obviously we're not hungry at a certain point. You're just like, okay, you're stuffed, but you keep putting food in your mouth. So to me, it's almost like I was doing it just because I felt like handcuffs are off. I can do it now.
Yeah, very. I think it's a big psychological component there of feeling unrestricted, and I don't know, there's this odd urgency to it. I was eating fast too. I'm like, what are you doing? You're gonna eat tomorrow too, bro. I just
but I think there's still a physiological component to like when you start giving enormous amounts of sugar to a starved body, like ravenous happens. It's not hunger. It's like I can't fucking stop. It feels so good. Like so many like neurons in your brain are like dopamine and woo, So it's like there's a little both.
The taste I found was overwhelming. Things taste so much better when you're in that state.
Yeah.
And I remember when there was a point. This is also a funny story. This is me in 2009, so I'm a little more of an experienced competitor. I understand things. And I remember it was after Washington, and we stopped at Outback on the way back. Oh no! Which one has that delicious like vanilla almond might be, it's either Applebee's or Outback. I can't remember. This is dessert. The walnut apple crumble.
Oh, it's Outback. They have a cinnamon oblivion.
That's the one.
Yeah,
and
that shit's good.
I went there with Berto and Barb, and I ate it, and I was like, right now, if this was the way this food tasted all the time, I explained this. If this food tastes like this every time, I would never compete in bodybuilding again, and I wouldn't care that I got fat because this taste is better than all of those things, Fortunately, it doesn't last. But I remember being, I'm pretty hungry. I could still eat, even though I had 5,000 calories. This will be the last thing we do, my dessert for dinner, and then I'll go to bed. And I ate it, and I was like, or I could have 10, throw up, and then have 10 more, throw up and have 10 more, because it's that good, Yeah.
This makes me feel bad, though, because of all those stories. This was my last show. It's not like, back in 99. This was last time. But any other show, before that, I competed. I was still in season. So after my first show that season, I remember I had a chicken sandwich and a milkshake. After the second one, I was with Berto and Melissa. We went to super salad. What was that?
I'm in Florida, and I will be blown away in a tornado in a moment, or a hurricane, I guess. So, yeah. It set off some car alarms. Can you hear that?
Oh, my God.
Is it storming there?
Apparently.
That was crazy. Okay.
I hope you're okay.
Yeah.
Pretty close.
So let's start with that, right? Eric, because you're good at these things, we summarize the recovery diet in a minute. What we're kind of talking about.
So everything we just described, as crazy as it sounds, is very normal in starved people, which is essentially what you are by the time you get that shredded. Sure, you look better than your average starvation victim because you've been lifting weights and getting in essential nutrients, but when your body fat levels are that low, everything in your body, hormonally, neurologically, response to food, psychologically, all of being intrinsically related, is telling you to eat. And if there's available food and it tastes good, you're probably going to eat past the point of it being healthy or pleasant. That can continue for months sometimes and set someone back psychologically because they're losing all their work so quickly, and it can also make the next dieting season harder. If you actually put on so much weight that you have to diet in your off season to then start your off season, you're really, really prolonging that recovery period. So the original response to that, when people first started thinking maybe this isn't good, was the quote-unquote reverse diet, which is very slowly adding food back in and often resulting in being in a deficit even after your show. And I think what we promote is kind of a healthy middle ground where we are getting you out of a deficit immediately and intentionally putting on body fat, but at a controlled rate. And this is kind of putting the power back in your hands. It's kind of the same idea as a diet break. Instead of you waiting until your car breaks down to get your oil changed, you go, right, yes, I'm going to be in a calorie surplus. I'm going to control it. I'm going to, on purpose, gain about, half a pound to a pound a week for 4 to 6 weeks, and then stop at a very reasonable, athletic, healthy body fat percentage before you outpace yourself with these massive hunger cravings because you don't have a plan. And this has been something that we've had a lot of success with, and it makes sense physiologically, psychologically, and it seems to be working practically much better than old approaches.
Word. That was great. I just want to tell you that was
all right.
Great.
Good night. See you guys later.
All right.
And so right afterwards, the immediate, like we said, we allow for that, which I probably falsely said. We don't allow for exactly being as much of idiots as we were. But like you said, not tracking, unrestrained, probably through the whole weekend, and then starting to eat like a normal human on Monday. And by normal human, we mean a pretty good surplus from where you were. But it's probably still less than normal humans, a lot less than when you started prep for a lot of people. But it's still probably the largest surplus that you'll see for the next, say, 6 to 12 weeks, or for the next while.
Yeah, for the next time you reverse diet, recovery diet.
Yeah. And so does that ever scare your clients? Because it does mine.
Yes.
And I don't even go that crazy. I'm like, okay, we're going to compete, and then you're going to be eating a lot more than you were a week ago. And they kind of are like, it scares mine anyways.
I think it scares most people.
Yeah.
It's no one can stop on a dime and make a complete psychological turnaround in a day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you've been literally overly focusing on the scale, ensuring you have a calorie deficit, thinking about losing fat, stressing over not even just quad separation, but striations in your quads if you're competing in a really lean division. And then within a 24-hour period, you're told, okay, now the goal is to actually gain fat purposely at a controlled rate. That's, even if it makes sense intellectually, I found a lot of really smart, experienced competitors still have this kind of visceral freak out, and it takes some coaching. Yeah.
I do. I know I still do.
Normal.
I think with some people, you tell them we were going to do that. It's like it's not stressful until they actually start, like Eric was saying. So they start seeing things like it seems like their hard work is starting to dissipate.
Right.
Like now all of a sudden your conditioning's, you're like, oh crap, where'd my abs go? And it's a freak out. And then some people will be like, oh, I got to get back on this diet. And so it's like, that's not the goal anymore, is to get shredded anymore. So it's hard. It's like once they start doing it, that's when I notice people start to get more of the freak out.
Yeah, and they want to fix it because they think that then was that you it's like I say in all the last couple presentations that I've done with the whole psychology thing, is like, you have someone who's about to get into this sport, their physique is probably like a 6 or 7 in their brain. You bring it up to the best it's ever looked, to a 10, and now like that 8 physique isn't good enough because they know what the 10 is like. How long do you find till people can let go on average? Because you guys collectively have seen people through a recovery phase probably a good 20, 30 times more than I have. What's an average amount of time from like as last show day happened? I would say they're fully psychologically chill and recovered. As experience.
Depends on how psychologically sound they were coming into the prep in the first place.
Really? Okay.
I mean, like some people, they're never really happy with their off-season body, and that's a coaching point. So getting them back to being normally unhappy, that would be their baseline, but it's still not very good.
Yeah.
Those people definitely struggle more. And it's, I hate to, like it happens in a lot of divisions, but sometimes I'll find it happens more with some of the female competitors. And I think women in general, and this is true in demographic, like psychological surveys, typically have less body satisfaction than men in general. Because it's a larger part of what we tell, at least in Western society, women are valuable for, unfortunately. So I find men are good to go unless they were one of the few guys, not few, one of the many competitors at least, who did struggle with eating and body-relating issues before prep. The average male bodybuilding competitor, 2 to 3 weeks, honestly. I think because they have the food there and they kind of get their recovery back and they get sane pretty quick again. Average female competitor, maybe twice as long.
Okay. Jeff, what do you think?
My experience.
I just had a guy, basically, he did what we did back in the day. He just ate and ate, even with a plan. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just the inexperience too. It's like 2 or 3 preps he's done, so it's like not a lot of experience. So even I still struggle with that transition period. I've been doing this for over 20 years. He basically ate himself sick, and then he gained a ton of weight, and then right now it's like dealing, because he wants to get back in the cut. He wants to actually go back into a diet to get rid of it. And I'm like, instead of trying to diet, let's just let your body fall where it falls and just try to mentally get him back in line, more so than, okay, let's set your diet here to get some weight off. Just let it do what it wants to do right now. And just so it's more coaching him on behaviors now at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so go ahead, Jeff, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's just that it's very individual, what I've noticed with the athletes I've worked with. Some come out, like Eric said, like 2 or 3 weeks later, they're fine. They're just rolling. And then there's other ones that you're just like, wow, okay, we're 3 or 4 months later and we're still having issues.
Yeah, and I should have put the caveat that that's when the recovery diet goes right. Like they're following the protocol. Because I will say this, look, I had probably a 1 to 5% success rate with the true reverse diet, where, or I guess the typical reverse diet. I probably had like 50-50 success with the recovery diet. Which isn't great, but it's a huge improvement. Like, as hard as recovery is, that's just the nature of the transition period. But it's such a higher level of success than the reverse diet, and ends up with a better net product 9 out of 10 times. But anyway, yeah. So when I say that 2 to 3 week or that 4 to 6 week for some, it's really has more to do with if you're already in that 50% category, you're able to follow that protocol without diverging.
Yeah, and I think although I know that there's cases, which luckily none of my athletes yet have been, to where like someone can't stop binging. Like I know that happens, but with me, I find what's not want to say like a roadblock, but what is difficult is you could have someone who's been a fucking machine, been awesome all through prep, exactly what they meant to do, follow directions to a T, and it's whenever you put this recovery diet plan in place, which is, a pretty big surplus compared to where they were. But it's that, okay, well, now I can go out with my friends and I'm maybe 1,000 calories over this week. And then so-and-so came in town, or not this week, but like this Saturday, right? And then my friends were in town next week. And so Saturday, Sunday, I saw my family and I was 1,000 calories over my prescription those 2 days. And then, so it's not like these big crazy binges, but it's like now the social, the environmental, the whatever. Like if they're at home by themselves in seclusion, they'd probably still continue being the machine. But and I just don't think anything's wrong with that. It's just that's one of the things, like how the pleasure you get from letting go a little and eating all the food. It's like, okay, well now I can see my friends and my family can come over. We can go on vacation, and that's when I feel like the diet. Like, I can't be mad at that stuff. You know what I mean? Because now they're becoming normal humans again. And so I think that, but then those athletes still get a little bit frustrated. They're not holding on to the physique quite as well. So it's like, but what's worse? Like now you're a human. Maybe you gain an extra 3 to 10 pounds more than we wanted by this time, say 6-10 weeks later. But, like, you have energy. Your friends don't hate you. Your wife kind of loves you again. Like all that great stuff. So it's just
because your family, everybody wants to feed you when you're done.
Yeah.
Because you basically you not only deprived yourself, but you deprived everybody else too with some of these social things.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden everybody's like pressuring you. Hey, come on, let's go out to lunch. Hey, let's go out to dinner. So you need to tell these people no. Keep telling them no. It's like
I know
you have to live a little bit.
Those athletes sometimes feel bad, and I'm like, but it's still kind of a good thing for you.
Yep.
That's where it becomes kind of important to manage other areas besides that.
Yeah.
Like that one meal, like, okay, you're stressing over that one meal, but you still have the power to change your other meals or the day and the days leading to it or the days after. You still have that power, and you should still hold yourself accountable to a certain degree. Yeah,
for sure. But I think that's the environmental and social, if someone can go there and prep, which most people can if they're actually getting like on a bodybuilding stage. Okay, they actually went there, and then now, it's like they're so not susceptible, because it says it like it's a bad thing too, but it's I guess weighing the benefits per person, I guess. Like it's that exchange, a few more pounds versus like now everybody loves you again. Not that they like hated you, but now you're becoming a human, and that's an important part of the healing process too, and why we suggest gaining fat.
Yeah, and the root of a lot of the issues, like you said earlier, are physiological. Like dieting down to those levels induces disordered eating because you lose your satiety and hunger signals. Mm-hmm. So as you get back into, I don't have to be in this mindset for prep, and then you start going out and hanging out with people. Whenever there is not structure to prevent overeating, there will be overeating because there isn't that normal body, mechanism of hunger and satiety. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like the reverse diet is, okay, what's the minimal amount of structure and life and position we can put there to prevent gaining too much body fat, but still gaining some so you get healthy again. Because we know without any limitations, it can become a shit show, like we described, and that becomes detrimental mentally as well. And and we also know that you're probably going to be pretty sapped of energy, and you just won't be able to sustain. There's not as we talked about in the Sacrifice to Win episode, the switch isn't flipped anymore, right? You flipped it for 8 months, and you probably shouldn't have it flipped. So you have to find some way to have adherence to the structure without being in grind mode, because you need to be out of grind mode, and that means you need to have something that's very easy to adhere to. You have to treat yourself kind of like that middle-aged personal training client who, doesn't actually like lifting weights and really just wants to drink wine and hang out with their friends and is so stressed by life. That frustrated me when I was a personal trainer back in the day, but that's kind of the mental state you're in. Now you're frazzled, stressed, and you have to do things you don't want to do. So, okay, you give like the minimum effective dose of structure to help them not get unhealthy the other way.
Yeah. I think, too, what's hard, even if someone does follow protocol, right, and they understand, and most people do, right? Most people on paper, not even on paper, on video, when I give them the recovery diet video, like 3 to 4 weeks before end of season, I'm like, watch this, absorb it. They'll come back, yeah, sounds great, da-da-da. But then when they're in it, like Jeff said, it doesn't seem so great on their own body. But not only is it the scale going up, I think, and I'm glad you're on this episode, Eric, because I think there's something to be said for how it doesn't come on the way it was lost. The body fat comes on squishier in weird pockets, distributes differently, and we don't really know why. Is that right?
I got some theories.
Okay, let's hear them. Let's hear the theories.
The first theory is we know that when you go through a bodybuilding contest prep, your hormones get all jacked up.
Right.
And it's also true, and there's people who take advantage of this or make wrong scientific conclusions based on this, that your hormonal milieu in your body does dictate body fat distribution. However, in a normal state, those aren't hormones you can modify, or you shouldn't want to anyway. It's just your normal physiology. That's why we all have different body fat distribution patterns, right? Mm-hmm. And men and women distribute differently. So that's why they sell these bunk diets or protocols of, hey, if we modify your macros or your food sources, we can change your hormonal profile. Well, this is one of those few, that's bullshit, right? But however, this is one of those few times where your hormonal profile is completely changed. Your testosterone is tanked, your cortisol levels are through the roof, and for a male at least, the testosterone part. And now you're gaining body fat rapidly while you're in that state. So you see this kind of initial odd, different distribution, and then it starts to go back to normal. And I think also a lot of it is a constant state of water retention and bloat. And it also may be that, there's theory around how fat cells fill up with water in anticipation of needing to stay full of fat. And that could be that squishy fat that you're talking about as well. So a combination of those three things, probably.
Yeah. I know that personally, like, I've always carried weight in my torso, like my just basically stomach area. And then as soon as I finished my last prep, I had like mini saddlebags, and I never have had like a big lower half. I was like, what is this? And that took me like 3 or 4 months to be like, oh, my butt's back again in a normal way, and not like in a weird squishy side way. Like, anyways, that's an example of what I'm talking about for listeners who've never been through a prep. Like, not only does it come on squishier, like you said, but in places that it doesn't always like to store. Do y'all have similar experiences with that as males?
Yeah.
Give me yours, Jeff. What's your normal versus?
Well, my normal body fat distribution pretty heavy in the torso. But after the last prep, I see my ass got big first. And
yeah.
I've never seen that early. It's like my ass got bigger. I had these really lean arms and legs, and I had this ass and stomach basically. Yeah. But as time goes on, then I distribute more so in the torso, chest, stomach. I'm not like Berto where it's all in his butt and he gets abs, year round. Lucky him.
I know. It's okay. I store like a boy. I store like you, Jeff. So that's cool. But that's easy. Well, do you?
But it comes off different. Like when I prep, it comes off different than when it comes back on. It's weird.
I lose weight from
when
the
I'm dieting
outside
down,
in.
I look like I'll hit 180 dieting down. I look great. I hit 180 going back up, and I'm like, oh shit, I look like fat.
Thank you. That's all I want to hear.
Not fat, but it looks different. Not
fat.
To the normal person, I still look good. Okay.
Yeah. Holmes.
Yeah, I've got top 4 abs year round, and then when I diet down, they fade pretty quick afterwards. And, it takes me forever for my legs to get lean. And then when I finally start eating again after the show, then my abs blur and my legs stay for a little bit. And then within like a month, it gets back to normal. So there's like a little period where I actually get a gut and I'm like, what the hell? Like, I get 25, I can be like 25% body fat literally and still have a visible top 4, but I'll have like, like muffin top and like fat face, so.
That's funny. You distribute like Ogie.
Sort of.
His is like his lower back, upper thigh. Elkins is like that too.
I gain like inner thigh. Like my legs start rubbing together and shit. It's not good.
Oh, you lose your thigh gap.
Yeah. Exactly.
But I think that's difficult, or that's something that people, because there's no like science on that, I think people miss that a lot. And like my athletes I know have, like personally, and a couple of my athletes kind of freak out. They're like, what is this? Like, I looked so good at this weight on the way down. Why do I look so shitty on the way up? And I'm like, I don't know it, but I know it's normal. I don't know the exact reason why. Could be all these things, but I know that it's normal. And they, again, find that comforting because we're managing expectations. But
you can also think that you're on the way down, you're in a constantly tighter state because you're calorie depleted.
Yeah, let's say you're eating less.
Yeah.
And you're also, so it's the same weight, but you're eating less versus eating more. And in both cases, you're looking for leanness, not bigness, right?
Yeah.
In that post-diet period, you're regretting the weight you've lost, so you're paying attention to the fat that's on. And on the way down, you're not paying attention to the fact you're losing size. Like at that midway point, you're like, am I getting leaner? Am I getting leaner? So you don't notice that you're flat. And then here, you don't care that you're full because you just don't want to be fat, So I think it's a combination of those two things.
Yeah, of perception and what's actually happening.
Yeah.
Word. So I also want to talk about, I guess, the durations that y'all gave for you saying like someone being fully recovered or whatever. I think that fully recovered. Yeah, I was gonna say I think fully recovered physically. And I think for me, like, let's go over physically first. What are some markers for that? For me personally, and for a few of my clients, I've noticed that it's whenever we're increasing calories and your weight goes up, and then it's like this point where whether you eat 400 calories more or less on a day, nothing really happens anymore. Whereas when you're in a starved body, you could eat an extra couple hundred and you can see the changes on the scale and all that stuff. Whereas I feel like when they're recovered, it's a more resilient body, less affected by tiny changes in food intake. I think that's a good marker. Do y'all have other markers that you guys like to use for like when they're physically healed?
Food focus for me is a big one.
Yeah.
That's almost the primary one I pay attention to. I see it as physical and psychological personally. I mean, some people, obviously, if they have the issues, 40 over in the off season after 2 years of not competing, that's a different issue. But the average competitor, when they are not food focused anymore, that's probably the point when things are restored back to normal. That means like leptin and ghrelin are back and they control a whole bunch of other stuff if you want to talk the physiological side of it. Also sleeping through the night again. A lot of people start having those 4-hour pop awake in the middle of the night issues when they're really lean and dieted.
Sleep things. What else?
Strength returning.
Well, that happens right away. Like they go to the gym right afterwards and they're like, oh my God, I feel fucking. I'm like, please don't hit any PRs right now. Like 2 days after a show.
Not everybody. Some people take a longer curve to recover their strength.
Well, they at least feel good in the gym, though. Like they'll come back.
They don't feel like death. That's true.
Yeah.
Energy comes back. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And
speaking of things that come back,
that's huge. Your leverage starts. Like a lot of times, people because they're so focused on the way they're looking, then getting back in the gym and hitting some good numbers, it's like, oh, training's going good again. And so it gets them kind of. So you try to push them towards, okay, focus on performance. Focus on your performance. Because that's where, if your performance is going up, guess what? That means your physique's going to get better.
Right.
So I try to get them focusing more so on that. And a lot of it's too, it's like once you start eating and gain some weight back, your leverages start changing. You start moving more weight.
Can you guys speak to it? Because I really can't. Y'all probably, I guess, start wanting to like bang your wives again? Yep. Okay. How long does that typically?
So eloquently.
you set it up for it to be like, no, I can't speak to this, but you can. So when you want to get dirty with your wife, it's like, oh, okay. I didn't think you were going to go there, At least
I went there. Yeah, I went there because I know that obviously we have testosterone as females, but not in the same amount as you guys. It doesn't affect us in the same way as y'all. How long do you typically, I guess personally and with your athletes?
I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but I have had some female competitors who will comment on the fact that their libido is messed up from dieting. It's less common, I think, and it might just be less common because that's odd for a female client to share with me. For them, it might be more uncomfortable sharing with a male.
Yeah.
But actually, I want to ask you, Andrea, is that something you've experienced with yourself or clients? Change in that?
I like what you did there, Eric. You totally just went away from us, back onto her. Perfect.
It's okay. We'll come back to y'all. No, my personal experience, I think is personal in that my last prep, I was just starting to date Brandon. I actually met Brandon in it. So there was like no lack of that desire ever because it was like the newbie relationship stage. So we didn't have a problem there. And then the prep before it, I was single and absurdly isolated, focused on my goal, so I don't know. So I can't really tell either way. There was like, ain't nobody got time for that, and if I do got time for that, it's like just because like I'm stressed about school and like you'll do for now, and like we got to go back because prep happens. But then again, I just started dating Brandon through that second one because I only had 2 preps, and so we were good. So I don't know.
Well, the reason I deflected back to her as well is because it's pretty simple for guys. Your libido basically does this throughout prep.
But I'm saying, like, how long? Yeah, how long is you and your clients.
The funny thing is, you forget what normal is like, So, like, I think 2 weeks after, like, I'm good to go. And then every 2 weeks for about 2 months, I'm like, this is normal, Like, I keep, like, I remember in 2009, that was probably the most beat up I've ever been physically from a prep. Mm-hmm. 2 weeks later, I was like, hey, I'm not tired when I walk across the room to go to the bathroom. I'm good to go. Like, and I forget how abnormal that is. Or like workouts, I don't have to listen to like Disturbed for a 30-minute drive and then psych myself up to do lateral raises. Like, okay,
Disturbed is your pre-workout jams?
No, this is a unique year. 2009 was pretty.
Okay.
No, I listen to like funk and underground hip hop now. 2009 was a very angry year for Eric Helms.
Okay.
But
I'm not judging you. All right.
Yeah, you shouldn't.
I did for a second.
Don't judge me. No, but so no, I had a very that was a unique year, but nonetheless, I was so beat up that I just kept relearning how far down the manhole I'd fallen, So, but it was a long time, 2009, to get back to normal. 2011, probably my best prep and my most normal. I think 2 months later, I was pretty much like 95%.
Word, Jeffrey.
I'm 45, so yeah, I mean, libido's tanked. No, I'm kidding.
He's like, we don't do that. We don't do that. We have kids. We don't do that.
No, yeah. No,
yeah. They don't even know how you had kids. They just showed up on.
Yeah, like Eric said, it tanks, but I've definitely taught myself during preps that, one, I need to really stay aware of the emotional aspect of a relationship. Because generally, if you're connected emotionally, it'll lead to the physical. So even, there's stages of my last prep where I was just like, towards the end, I'm like, I don't feel like doing that. I'd rather eat than do that. But, I mean, I did it anyway just because I know how important that is to a relationship.
Hashtag outwork sex.
And I mean, once you initiate, I mean, everything works. It's not like it's not going to stop working.
But doesn't it for some?
True erectile dysfunction is pretty rare. It happens. I wouldn't like not being able to get it up or not being interested. That's one thing.
Yeah, that's separate.
Yeah, that's one.
See, I don't know. I don't have the piece.
I don't have the issue is not like physically. It's not like I can't perform. It's just like
you're just like I can't even start because I'm so tired.
It's like I'm so tired and hungry. It's like that's the last thing on my mind is reproducing. I want to go eat so I don't die.
Yeah, there's a big difference there. Like if you we're gonna have to say it. So if you're a man who's not turned on, and someone was to touch you in your genital area, you would probably still get an erection.
Okay.
If you were a man who is turned on and that happened and you didn't get an erection, that's true like erectile dysfunction.
Yeah.
So most people don't get true erectile dysfunction. Their body still responds physically. It's just I don't initiate. I don't think about it. Like I'm just like oh wow, I haven't had sex in 2 weeks, Oops,
like some of the athletes I've worked with, this is a huge issue. And a lot of times it's like their significant other don't understand what's going on. Like, why isn't this person why aren't they initiating? Why aren't they showing me affection? Mm-hmm. You're so freaking hungry. It's like, again, our animal instincts. It's like the last thing you're going to do when you're freaking 4, 5, 6% body fat is want to go reproduce. You want to go kill something and eat.
Can't feed myself. Let's have a kid.
Exactly. So it's like, if you're aware of these things, then and if you communicate, then the relationship would be that much better if there's some type of understanding.
So
honestly,
so
this is a conversation I've had many times with athletes.
Yeah.
And I've had and a lot of times, let's face it, we're assholes, at certain points of prep. Just because we are hungry, we're feeling miserable or whatever. Your overall mood and happiness kind of goes down.
Less ability to cope.
Yeah.
So it's like a lot of times it's like if you're like that in general throughout the day, I mean, it's hard. It's the people around you. It's hard to be around you when you're like that. So I really try to emphasize to some people when they start telling me some of these issues, like you really need to be aware of this and put a smile on your face even though maybe you don't feel like it.
It's also a useful coaching point. Like, I coach a lot of young men, and some of them are in a relationship where they're probably going to marry the girl. They're been married for less than, say, 3 years. That's just what happens when you coach a lot of guys in their mid-20s kind of thing. And I think, obviously my role is to help you get on stage and be an integrated bodybuilder with your life. I'm not telling you how to live, but when a competitor comes to me and is having relationship problems because they're not having sex, my first thought is that the only way they have to connect? Like exactly. that might work for your first couple of years of marriage, but having been married almost 11 years now, not that I'm like Mr. Perfect relationship, but there needs to be, if you want to continue to have that sex life that's healthy, there needs to be a lot of other ways to connect, or that starts to just fall by the wayside. So it's a useful opportunity. I try to express to the people I'm working with, like, hey, there's other ways to show your affection for that person. When's the last time you got her flowers? When's the last time you just called her out of the blue and just let her know how important she is to you? And they're like, oh, I'm not doing those things. And it's like, that's fine for now when you guys are ravenous 20-year-olds. But, dude, when you're in a older marriage, that's kind of like, you got to show affection in deeper ways sometimes and to keep that going. So,
man, look at all this wisdom from this podcast about fucking.
Yeah. I mean, who wants to have sex with an asshole? Who wants sex with an asshole?
Well, you'd be surprised.
I guess everybody has their breaking point, but I mean, in general, it's like you're not going to want to.
Now we're talking
initiate.
about butt stuff. See how quick
you
that
gotta
turned?
You got to listen to more Snoop Dogg, Jeff. Come on.
Shit. But anyways, on a more serious note. So yeah, I'm just aware of this. So like whenever I go through preps, even though I don't feel like it, I do it. I initiate and I do the things that Eric's saying. Okay, let me just like this morning I poured my wife a cup of coffee.
That was nice.
And brought it to her. Here you go. So it's like do things like that to help stay connected.
Yeah, and good for the guy listening. The way that women are interested in this sort of thing isn't always the same as us. You heard Andrea just go, oh, that's nice. That can turn into, oh, let's have sex in a relationship.
And so then you don't have to initiate. They're working on it. Yeah.
Exactly. You got to put those pennies in, not only your muscle bank, but also your relationship bank.
True.
Yeah. Damn. Life advice on the 3DMJ podcast.
Relationship
advice.
Positive.
But post show, I've like returned physically to normal. Generally, when I put about 10 pounds of fat back on, I gain about 10 pounds. I start feeling more like, oh yeah, I actually feel like I could go reproduce now.
And that's not 10 pounds of weight, 10 pounds of fat.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, because you can gain 10 pounds with water weight, but I ain't gonna change nothing.
Okay, so let's talk about that, right? I have a rule just based on my experience, and don't get me wrong, there's 1,000 bazillion things I've learned from you guys, but then it's like, the things that experience-wise I bring to the table with my athletes, right? And one of them is, if my athlete normally, say they check in Tuesday, report to me Wednesday, or whatever their normal is, if they compete on a weekend, well, they all do, okay, I make them not do their check-in right afterwards, and then not to weigh in for at least 4 days after their show, because I don't want them, because I know how sensitive people and most obviously competitors are to the scale, and how depressing it can be when it's not what you want. So I purposefully, like, okay, your show day is Saturday or Sunday, do your last show, right? Because that's what we're talking about, is the end of season.
Yep.
Last show is then eat whatever you want through the weekend, start tracking again on these numbers on Tuesday, which is higher than obviously before their show. And then don't wait, like, then you can start weighing in, like, say Thursday, Friday. They don't do a check-in for me that week, and then I'll hear from them normally like 9 to 10 days after their show, something like that, because I don't want them to report to me 3 days after they just binged, when they're still holding on to all that water weight and all that stuff. I don't want them to have to tell me out of guilt, well, I weighed this much and I feel like this or that. Whereas if I wait like the 10 days, they'll be like, okay, well, last week was shitty and I felt depressed, but I lost 5 pounds of that, and now I'm ready to tell you about it, you know?
I could say
go ahead.
Yes and no. I guess it just depends, because I like to make sure that before that show is even up, I can say, okay, this is what's going to end up happening. This is what you should expect. So with some people, it's like there's not that freak out. But I would say both. They're not either one of those methods is the right or wrong way. It's just kind of like I really try to insist that.
I was just wondering. I'm not saying mine's right, but I was just saying, like, that's a way that I feel like I'm attempting to help them deal with the immediate post-show freak out.
Yeah, because it's in general, too. Like, once we get through the recovery and they're, like, kind of deeper into the off-season, a lot of people will go, I don't know what I was so freaked out for. Yeah. You know, because eventually you get to your happy, normal place, and you're like, okay, what was I freaking out so much about? Yeah. So I think I try to tell people too, it's like when you're going through this process, it's the same thing with prep. You kind of don't know what to expect once you start. You're going through the prep. You don't know everything that's going to unfold. It's the same thing when you get into the transition period. You don't, if you have that mindset of like, okay, I'm going to be learning here, as opposed to trying to be perfect, and embrace that you're going to probably see things that maybe you don't like. So I try to get people in that mindset, like embrace this unknown period, because it's where you're really going to grow and learn. And once you're out of it, then you're going to be like, oh, shit, okay, now I'm that much wiser. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a similar thing to Jeff. Like 2 weeks out, the week before they start peak week, I go over the peaking plan. I'm talking about the Excel sheet. I'm talking about what the experience is going to be like on stage and all this stuff. That's 2 weeks out, you know. And 1 week out, right before they start the peak week, that's probably the longest video they get from coach the whole season. And that's me talking about the recovery diet, what it's going to be like. And you're right. And I also typically, in most cases, I'd be like, don't weigh in this. I still have them check in on the regular schedule, but I don't have them weigh in that week. And then once we've had the 1 week post show, then I start getting the average weigh-ins. And I coach them all through, like, look, we're going to have a new baseline. Wherever you're at 1 week post show, we're going to look to gain X amount over this X time period, you know. And, you know, obviously that's different with everybody, because not everyone is, people freak out more than others, so you have to take, you know, individual approaches, obviously. But
yeah. And just so that we're clear, I swear I tell them about stuff the few weeks leading up to. I'm really sensitive. I think because I'm really, well, I know, just to the listeners, I know you guys know that. I don't know if it's because I've obviously lived through my own body going through this shit, but I'm so, it's weirdly like, that's my favorite part of coaching, is coaching out of season. Because I think it was such an important period for me that I don't know if I've had it like worse than y'all. That's not what I'm saying. But I think as a girl, and then we've talked about this before, like in my origins episode, being like a sort of famous figure at that time, like on YouTube and video diarying everything. Diarying is not a word. I don't know what that was.
Yeah, it is. For famous people like you, you can say that.
not famous, but it was like videos 3 to 5 times a week. I just competed. Now I feel fat as shit. I don't want to talk to the internet at all, but I have to keep, and like I didn't know how to do it. And so it was like there's a few videos that I'll look back at sometimes, and I'm like, damn, that was 1, that was stupid, or 2, like that sounded really bad, and 3, I look back on it and I'm like, damn, why was that such a big deal to me? But you're so sensitive then, like Jeff, like you said, people look back and they're like, oh, that was dumb, but everything is such a big deal at that time, and it's so hard to get across, like, I know this seems like a big deal, but you really won't give a shit in like a month, 3 months, a year, like you really won't care this much. Like you said, Eric, it's like you have to train yourself out of that thinking. Like you're trained to worry about an ounce of food, and then you have to be like, that doesn't matter at all. And I think that's the hardest part of bodybuilding that is unspoken or unknown, is that a lot of other sports, it's like go, 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 go. In season, you're going in game time. Off season, it's strength and conditioning focused, but it's still go, go, go. Whereas with bodybuilding, like you have to learn go, 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 and then off, like really far off in order to make the gains that you need to.
Experience plays such a huge role in this too. I mean, like, the recovery diet is like, I'll just give you an example, like, because I people probably know I'm doing my PhD, and I haven't taken on very many new clients in the last 3 years at all. So, but I've still worked with a lot of people, and they are the competitors who come back to me have been competing a long time. Like I just recently prepped a couple people who got like second pro cards or did a pro season, and they like, or they're like their 12th pro season or something like that, and they don't need a recovery diet video. They don't need me to, like, they know what's coming, they know what works for them, they know the outcome we're trying to get to with the recovery diet, and they do that. So I still talk to them about it, but a lot of the times they won't, and I won't push to have, keep coaching with me post show, because I know they're good to go. But first, second, even sometimes your third season competitors, it's so hard to have faith that you are going to feel differently a couple months later. Because it doesn't feel like that in the moment, and I think when you've repeated that process so many times, you can take faith in remembering, oh yeah, that's right, 3 months post show last time I was way better mentally than I was 1 month, and I need to make decisions that pay respect to who I'm going to be, not just who I am right now while I'm freaking out. So it's easier to mentally soothe yourself when you know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
That's a fucking great point, because I keep referring to my 2013 season because I had 2011, 2013, but I never came out of 2011. And that's why I feel like I've really only had one phase post show that actually like led to a healed human, because I really never came out of it. In 2011, like I stayed within 10 to 15 pounds, but more importantly, I never got to a point where I was like really gaining measurable strength. I never got to a point where I had normal periods again. I never did any of that shit. And I think for the listeners too, like I did compete in 2013, but I wouldn't say that I am a healed human until 2016, because I was going to compete again in 2015 because I was athletically bored, which doesn't make sense as far as like progress. I'm much bigger now in the last 6 months than I was going into that. Like, everything's in hindsight.
Yeah, I'm bored. Let's start.
Yeah. I was like, I need to compete in something, so, meh.
But even for me, I'm like the opposite. I've done this how many freaking times? And I still don't know how to I still haven't done it perfectly yet.
Yeah.
Because after the 2014 season, I thought I was doing freaking fantastic. I basically did the recovery diet before we even labeled it a recovery diet.
Uh-huh.
And I was like 10 pounds over, and I'm like, okay, I need to stay leaner because I'm an older athlete. I've been doing this forever. I need to stay leaner so the next time I compete, I don't have to diet as long. Mm-hmm. So I'm 10 pounds over for like months afterwards. But like Eric was saying earlier, I was food focused. I was still food focused. So I was like, it was when I finally went on vacation, I gained about 3 pounds from that week of vacation. I felt a huge difference. Like when I came back to train, I was like, oh wow, I actually feel better when I'm training. My leverages feel better, I have more energy. So I'm like, okay, let's put on a little bit more weight. And I stopped being food focused. But then because I was so almost like handcuffed, I was handcuffed for a 50-week prep. I was handcuffed, right? And then after that was over, I was handcuffed for months afterwards, trying to stay 10 over. All of a sudden, it was like a huge shift. I was like one extreme to now I'm eating way too much. And then not because I was hungry, but it was just like more psychological, like a behavior. Mm-hmm. And then that's how I get 30 pounds over. So I'm still trying to figure out, okay, where's the middle ground here? What's my normal? Yeah. I still don't think I found it yet.
Yeah. I think what you said is important too, that, and it was big for me also in that compared to most females, of course I care about body image in some way, but I'm not so like, I don't want to say I care about it less than most people. Like I cared about staying close to stage weight after 2013 because I thought of it as a strategic thing. Like education wise, I was like, I get it. Weight has to go on. I'm not as attached to having to be so lean. I have a boyfriend now, which I think makes a difference too when I'm not looking to like find a mate, right? So I'm pretty secure in my body image. It was just, I'd heard repeatedly over and over, you know, as someone who got on stage at like 115, 118, I should probably be under 130 because that's within good distance of that, right? Not having to unnecessarily gain or lose too much fat next time I compete. But at the same time, I didn't realize until I was like 145, 150, which I know sounds like a lot, but it took me a long time to get there. Now, the strength, the energy, the everything else is off the charts compared to what it was. I'm a much better athlete at about 145 than I am at 130, even though that's that much closer to stage weight.
My experience personally is I can relate to that because that's basically what was happening to me at 10 pounds over.
Yeah.
I like the way I look. I look leaner. I was like, yeah, okay, it makes sense. If I go to diet again, getting off 10 pounds versus 30, obviously getting a much shorter diet. But I was like, I'm struggling now. I feel shitty now. Why am I going to suffer now just to try to have a shorter prep or whatever? Okay, let me just do a longer prep because for me personally, I'm experienced with that, so it's not a big deal.
Yeah. Well, with me, it could be just the duration too. I don't know if it was maybe because I was not eating enough or because now I'm just time-wise further from that mentality. But I look leaner at 145 than I did at 130. Or I am leaner. Right. I mean, yeah.
So for me, it was like looking like it was the generalizations that got me. Like, oh, I need to be doing this. This is what the generalization is. But I needed to basically let go of that and find what works for me. And I think a lot of times, like with athletes, when we transition them into that off scene, it's like, okay, we're going to generalize you need to be somewhere in here, but we don't know the answer until you actually get there. Once you're there, then it's like, okay, so it's like whenever I try to get an athlete to gain weight, moving up, trying to increase performance, all that. Yeah, here's the generalizations we're starting with. We get to that point, then all these new questions arise. Okay, is this a comfortable weight for you to even walk around at? Are you food focused? How's your performance? How's your energy? How's your recovery? Yada yada yada. I mean, if you're checking it off the list, each one's like, okay, everything's okay. Okay, great. That's the generalization work. If not, then maybe you do need to gain more weight, so you can find more. You're more normal. If it means you need a longer prep later on, you start the diet earlier. Or you do it what Alberto will probably talk about in the next podcast. You got to diet before the diet, set up the prep.
Yeah.
So there's different ways of doing things, and I think we could always start with the generalizations, and then from there we got to customize.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why our recommendations are like 5 to 10% over stage weight. That's actually a really broad range. That's double itself, you know, because I've definitely had the competitors who get 8 over and they're fine, you know.
Yeah.
They're often the competitor who comes to me only about 10 to 12 over. And they're if they have a healthy relationship with food, they're definitely fine, And then there's other people who like myself, I'm probably more similar to Jeff in that just at least physiologically, like 10 over is pretty hard for me. 15 over is starting to feel okay, but I actually feel best at like 20 over.
Yeah.
So.
And
one more.
Yeah, the thing with me too, if we want to talk about like psychological, and again, only because I haven't worked with a whole slew of athletes like y'all have. I have just my experience to go off of a lot, and I think a lot of the reason that 2016 has been such a healing period to where I finally feel over my other preps is that I picked another sport to focus on. I know that we work with a lot of dual athletes, so people who were or in their bodybuilding off seasons decide to do powerlifting. I think that it's just such a benefit to have off-season goals outside of the long-term next season, because next season could be 3 to 5 years from now. What do you do in the meantime, kind of thing? Can you speak a little about that, Eric?
Forms, but I totally agree. I mean, people are always wondering about, like, is powerlifting a good vehicle for making gains in the off-season? It's like, dude, the primary reason you see so many of our athletes powerlifting is just to do something else. You know, if there was another sport that lined up as nicely, but it gave somebody off-season goals and focus so that they didn't have to stare at their abs in the mirror and freak out, we'd use that, you know. And I would say, you know, even though Jeff's not a powerlifter, he's always setting goals and thinking about things, and he's very introspective and game planning things, you know. And just like you, like, when you're doing, you know, grid, it doesn't have to be a organized activity. It just depends on what your mindset is, but you need to have some way of creating structure and focus in a healthy way that isn't just you being uber focused on the next season. Or you had one of those experiences like you had, Andrea, where your prep never really ended after 2011. You know, just kept continuing. That was kind of like me. Like 2009, I was always still grinding. I ground all the way through. And I remember when I did my last show in 2011, I was not at all daunted by the fact that I would be not getting on stage for 6 years, you know, after I finished my PhD, because I was so burned out from basically having 2 years of grinding. I remember in 2007, I had to force myself to stay off stage in 2008 because I was just so motivated to get back on. Mm-hmm. So it's just that contrast. And so having things like a PhD to focus on, or coaching, or powerlifting, or grid, I think or your family even, just something that can take some of that obsessive energy that most physique competitors have and put it something healthier than just kind of staying in the dungeon in your mind all the time, you know?
Yeah. My personal experience, like back in the late 90s, because I was like super uber focused on the bodybuilding thing in my first few seasons, but then I started playing basketball, I started playing tennis, and I was like, that was more my focus for like 2 years than actually bodybuilding. I'd still weight train 2 or 3 times a week, but I was playing a ton of tennis and basketball, and I loved it. It was like a nice break. I needed something else to focus on. But then as I've gotten more experience, like now it's like I'm more bodybuilding. I'm totally bodybuilding focused in the off season, but I think because it's just I've been doing this for so long, I know how to kind of just like not get overly focused and stressed out on, okay, I got to make these improvements, because I know as long as I'm putting the work in, I'll be fine. I'll improve because it's just from years of experience. I've gotten better almost every single season. So it's like there's just reassurance now with my training, like I'm going to improve as long as I'm training.
Yeah, and I think that's...
for people who are new at this, it's like that's because they are stressed. I gotta get better. That, you know, they're a little bit insecure about if they actually are going to make improvements. So like Eric's saying, powerlifting or doing whatever else, you have grid, whatever, it kind of just takes away from that overly focused state of mind on one thing.
Yeah, I think what is really important that we kind of said, but I wanted to underscore, is that there's a lot of other shit you can do while still making bodybuilding progress. Like, it's not that it's not so serious. It's just you can only do so much, right? The fitness fatigue model. Right. You can only do so much. And unless you decide to go run marathons, which might not be the best for your bodybuilding goals, but a lot of sports transfer over. A lot of sports, you can still practice those sports while you're progressing as a bodybuilder.
And they're better than the alternative. You stressing over staying lean and going through these binge eating episodes to try to keep looking like a bodybuilder actually hurts you more, I would even say, than going out and doing 5Ks and 10Ks, you know, as it's probably counterproductive becoming a middle distance or an endurance athlete in your bodybuilding off season, even if you're doing everything else right. But I would say it's probably less counterproductive than doing all of those, you know, constantly reevaluating your physique, going through these cuts when you're supposed to be gaining weight, freaking out, and having these, semi-eating disorder relationships with food. So I would totally agree.
Yeah.
Because when I was playing tennis and basketball, I remember I was playing tennis like 3 or 4 times. Basketball was like 2 to 3 to 4 times a week. I was only weight training 2 or 3 times a week. So I was still making strength gains, even though I was only training 2 or 3 times a week. But because I was active on those other things, I was relatively on the leaner side. And I was eating a shit ton of food. So it's like I wasn't even focused on like eating or any of that. I was just eating because normally. But the training was still improving.
Yeah, and some people too, like when you finish a prep, you might be able to continue. You might still have the desire to go to the gym every day, but sometimes like you're just fucking overworked and you don't even know it just because you were hungry and you think it's because you being hungry. But like Jeff said, you can train 2 or 3 times a week and still probably continue making progress out of a prep for a real long time.
Yeah. You said something pretty insightful in, I want to say it was the show day preparation, Andrea. You were like, the people who struggle the most coming out of the season are sometimes those who are not looking at what we like to call a sport as a sport. Whether someone doesn't want to think it's a sport is fine, but I think you need to see yourself as an athlete. Like if you're coming into this as a personal challenge, or not that it can't be that and you be an athlete, or it's the culmination of you coming from obese to healthy and then even lean weight, or you want to see if you can do it and then you decide to stick with it. I think all of those kind of toe in the water or partially social acceptance reasons or becoming the new you reasons, those are all tied to how you're seen, how you see yourself. But when you approach bodybuilding as this is an athletic endeavor, then you can think strategically. But it's really hard to think strategically when it's like, this is the new me. It's like, no, you're actually tying up bodybuilding into your identity in a socially accepting way and what you look like. And it's very difficult to separate those things. But if you see it as an athlete and you go, right, it makes sense for me to be in a surplus and gain weight, and that's not as likely to get derailed rather by, I don't like the way I look right now, But if you're doing it for the other reasons, then you're just going to be constantly bouncing back and forth from trying to do what is probably healthiest and best, and then being emotionally depressed from the side effects of that.
Right. And I think too, not just the intention of being an athlete, but I think recognizing that this sport is so slow. It's so slow. Like unless you're in your first year or two, everything you do takes a really long fucking time. Looking different on stage takes years. And so if you can't find shit to do in between, you won't be a better athlete, and again, if finding other shit to do makes you train less, it still in the long run might be the better thing for you to do as a bodybuilder. Finding something else to do might, and again, I'm speaking a lot from experience, but I'm also not so naive to think that my experience doesn't transfer. Like the things that I'm learning are helping me deal with a lot of my athletes, and they're finding, or followers or whatever, but they're finding other ways to channel their competitive nature in other sports, which makes them a better bodybuilder way down the road because they're not freaking out, like you said, all the time.
Yeah. I don't want this to sound like that we're not telling people not to focus on bodybuilding
right.
off season, because if you're not doing the right things in the off season as a bodybuilder, you're gonna get on stage and not looking improved.
Right.
Like if you come powerlifting focused but now all of a sudden you're not training your calves, you're not hitting your arms, well, guess what? You're gonna have these big old quads and ass, but you're gonna have these little calves and little arms on stage. So yeah, it's not. I don't want people to think like we're saying don't focus on your off season as a bodybuilder.
Right.
But
we're just saying that those boxes are easy to tick when you really think about it. You
exactly.
Train all your muscle groups in a progressive, effective way, even if it's not super optimal. You make sure you're in an appropriate surplus for your training age and your goals, and that's it. Then you have a lot of free reign.
Yeah.
But if you're not doing those things, then you're not really bodybuilding anymore at all. So.
Yeah.
But I just had one guy came off
okay.
of a season, and it's like he's a powerlifter too. So he basically went bodybuilding focused because he obviously was prepping. Now it's going the other way. So now he's like powerlifting focused. I'm like, okay, don't forget about your arms. Don't forget about your calves. He's like, okay, I won't. But yeah, so now his gears shifted to powerlifting. He never lost focus.
It's just like Robert Downey Jr. said, is you never go full powerlifter.
What? Who said?
How did Robert Downey Jr.
I know. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Tropic Thunder. He goes, you never go full retard. I was just
okay. But I think sorry, Helms. Sorry, I'm focusing on podcasting. I don't have time for those other sports like watching movies.
The sport of watching movies.
You're good at it. You're good at quotes, and you can't do that without doing your research. Is all I was saying.
Well, that's how I stay focused in the off season. I focus on quotes.
Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, I think what I want to say too is like it's because everything takes so long, right? Like we talked about, the advantage of that is it's not like you lose everything. Like if you do need to go on vacation, if you do need to take a week off, if you do, like you said, you need to tennis and basketball for a little while, it's not like your body is gonna it's all gonna come back, and it's gonna come back a lot quicker than you think. And it might actually be more fun when it comes back because you have the little newbie gains for like this long again. So I don't know. I think it's just bodybuilding's better when it's serious. But I think if you take it too seriously, it makes you a shittier bodybuilder if you don't allow the healing again and the recovery after season, because that's what we're talking about this episode. Is there are a lot of ways to recover. And if some of that takes you stepping out of bodybuilding for a while, it's not the end of the world, and it's not necessarily even bad for bodybuilding, is all I wanted to say.
Getting less focused on bodybuilding can be in service of bodybuilding.
Yeah.
Yes. That's what I meant. But yeah, calves and arms are cool. That's all.
Steve, I want what I just said on a square. It's a good quote.
Okay. Everything I've said, Steve, is a great quote. I'm going to need a transcript.
Not just mine.
All right. What's the longest, Jeff, that you've seen it took someone to like psychologically heal from a season? Like, do you have people on the roster that's like, we need you competed, but a year later, now I can let you go, or like 2 years later, or something?
In general, once athletes, I have very few athletes that stay on my roster that long after a season, like a full year.
What's normal?
Maybe only about like 2 or 3. I would say on average, it's probably anywhere between 1 to 3 months. Because usually it's like I try to really get them to be self-sufficient and transition. Mm-hmm. Like if they're still lingering on the roster 5-6 months later, weekly check-ins, it's like, then maybe I feel like sometimes I'm not doing my job well enough.
Yeah. Let's go into that before we go. Actually, let's close on like the strategies of the transition, right? And I think one of the best things that we can go into is like the tiers, nutritional tiers. Eric, can you go over those as we talked about them in the recovery diet video?
You have a lot more tiers. You're crying immediately post-show. Sorry.
He's so funny.
So yeah, there's a lot of different ways to track. Like I was talking about earlier, there should be, at a certain point, the minimal amount of structure you need to still reach your goals. That's kind of like the off-season mentality eventually, but it's very difficult transition from tracking everything just in case, because you're going to put it all on the line with speedo, Yeah. So I normally start, and you don't want to have huge contrast. It needs to be kind of this tiered approach. So, at the end of prep, we're probably tracking within 5 to 10 grams on all our 3 macronutrients, and we're not eating out at all. Everything's controlled unless it's like your mom's birthday or something like that, right? Then, so the recovery diet doesn't start with just eyeball. It starts with, we have still tracking macros, but let's broaden those ranges to 20 grams, and let's allow 1 to 2 meals out per week where you still track, but you estimate, and those days can be calories only. And I also use a bit of flexibility. So, like best is hitting your macros, good is protein and calories within 100, and then okay, still just absolutely fine, especially if you have less control of your diet on that day, it's just calories. So I use positive terminology too, good, better, best. Didn't mean to say okay earlier, but yeah, basically calories, protein, and then, macros. And I actually like to get people at a certain point in the off season to where they're not tracking calories anymore. It's just body weight, because because that becomes the surrogate for energy balance. If we want to gain at a certain rate, you're either gaining at that weight or you aren't, and you're intuitively eating. And then we just track the things that if they're untracked, will probably not be within the range they should be. Because the whole reason we're tracking is to enforce certain behaviors and ensure things are happening. And if you have enough experience tracking and you're not starving in the off season, unlike during prep, then those things should be happening automatically if we effectively form those habits. So for example, for me, and it's individual for each person, I track protein, because if I don't track protein, it tends to fall below what I think is probably the optimal range. And I make sure I intentionally get servings of fruits and vegetables. So besides that, I just look at my body weight a couple times per week. That's it in the off season. But during prep, it's, it all goes on the scale.
Right. Okay. What's your off-season tracking like, Jeff? Like, if we just talked about what Eric's was, what's yours when you're not? Is it just body weight?
Personally?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even get on scale. Like when I'm deep. After, because for a while when I was 10 over, I was like tracking almost everything. I was still pretty accountable. And that's probably why I stayed 10 over. So once I stopped that, got looser, I'm 30 over now. Then it just gets to a certain point where it's like I could eat whatever I feel like and I don't gain weight.
Right.
It's just, I don't track, and I know I'm eating enough food. I don't have to worry about protein because I tend to have no issues eating protein. So for me, it's almost like it's just like I eat whatever I feel like. Body weight stays the same, and that's about it. But I mean, for people I coach, it's kind of just weaning them away from being so OCD with everything to finding each person's normal. Because what I found is like everybody is so unique and different. That some people, like deep in the off season, they're still tracking, because if they're not tracking, they lose their shit. They just they lose their shit. And then I have other people, it's like, okay, we're only weighing in twice a week now.
Yeah.
And that's it. It varies, and you get a sense to each person because you've prepped them for months on end, so you get a pretty good sense of their ways and who they are and how they tick
and their neuroses. Like
people
mine
change too.
Yeah, mine's changed over the past year to where I don't have to monitor, which I'm sure this is true for both y'all too. At a certain point when you've been tracking so freaking long, I don't have to look at macros. I know I'm not under eating protein. I know I'm not
Well, you know what a chicken breast looks like, because you've been doing this for so damn long.
Not only that, I feel it. You know what I mean? And I'm sure you guys are the same. Like, if Brandon doesn't eat, or I'm sure Bert too, because he's like relatively a carb monster, and I'm relatively like a protein monster. Like, I eat 180 grams of protein without thinking about it, and I feel great. If I have like 120, which is like an average for probably some female my size, I'm like, damn, I don't feel. And I'm sure I might have created that reliance, but either way, like, it's a mindless, I know I'm eating enough protein. Like, if I'm allowed to select my meals and look at my plates, I don't have to think about the macronutrient ratios. I just kind of inherently know what a meal for me looks like. And I think that that's one of those, like, by the time someone's done with the season, like Eric said, you can kind of let go of the individual macros more and more, because it's not like I'm not going to accidentally eat 20 grams of protein and 300 grams of fat. Like, that's just not going to happen. But anyways, so I look at calories for the day. I track most days when I'm at home, and I only weigh in when everything's perfect, which has been really useful for me. So like, I only weigh in when I know I've tracked the day before and it's between 18 and 2100 calories, which is normal. I eat my dinner around 8 or 9, and I can wake up appropriately around like between 9 and 10. Those days, which happen maybe once so I probably weigh in like 1 to 2 times a week.
There you go. So
just to kind of
the conditions where it's an accurate weigh-in.
Right. Like, if I eat a super late dinner, or if I wake up extra early, I'm not weighing in, because I know it's like data that's not really
skewed.
Yeah. So anyways, listeners,
funny,
those are a lot of tools. Those are a lot of ways to use or not use certain types of data.
Yeah. And it's like, you got to be okay with where you're at too. Like, I tracked my macros for 5 years. It didn't really stress me out. I just, at a certain point, I was just like, why am I doing this? That was basically my realization. It's just like, I know what my macros are before I enter them. Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
So
like you can't unlearn it.
Right, and I'm probably not as good as I used to be just because it is a skill. And I would say it's probably better for your guys' future, off-season podcast. But, like, I do think if you're in deep off-season, haven't competed in a while, and you're not tracking at all, you don't want to just start prep with tracking. You probably want to track in the off-season for like a month before you start prep. So it's not everything at once, like deficit, cardio, and tracking. That makes prep hard when you start. And it kind of feels very daunting when you're like, oh, I got 8 more months,
Yeah, for me, it's like I go, because I'm doing any of that. It's like a dimmer switch. I slowly start to change the way I'm doing things. Obviously, so now I got to get used to getting my body back on a scale. I got to get used to weighing food out. It's like, so I think the first couple of weeks of this prep, it was like that first 2 weeks I allowed myself to wean in, not just to kind of just flip a slight switch on and off. I mean, because that creates more stress for me. It's like, okay, and all of a sudden I go from 0 to 100 like that.
Yeah. That's the mentality. Even the old school bodybuilders had that. Have you ever heard of the hardening phase that some of the old school bodybuilders would do?
No.
I mean, it's kind of like it's kind of bull, but at the same time, the strategy makes sense. Like, before they would really start their contest prep, they would just start tightening things up, not overeating, eating a little quote unquote cleaner, doing a little more, just doing some cardio and doing a little higher reps, like things that some of that doesn't make sense. But the point is they would tighten up without being on a strict diet where they go for the 4 weeks of semi-food restriction, moderate food restriction, a lot of food restriction, which is a typical old school diet. They'd have this hardening phase where they're probably at roughly maintenance or very slight deficit, but they're getting themselves mentally ready to do the diet. And I think that's the same principle. It's just a different, reality now. So.
Yeah. Something else that I think might be useful to hear for some people that worked really well for me in that whole, year or whatever of recovery is, and that I know now, and it'll be way easier next time, is that I was always scared to loosen up, obviously, as most people are, but it was life events that helped me to do it. So obviously after season, Berto gives me more food, and I'm like, okay, but I'm still tracking within this many grams. But I remember the first time I was working at the gymnastics place, the first time we went out for a staff dinner, I woke up the next day and nothing happened. Like, I wasn't 5 pounds heavier. I ate really well. I was like, oh, okay, that's all right. So then, I would allow that every 2 to 4 weeks. I'd actually go out and do whatever the fuck I wanted. And then it was like that for months. And I felt like I'm so free because I can go out and eat every once in a while. But then we had that big trip. We drove from California to Sacramento for Christmas the next year or whatever, or a few months later.
Oh, from where to Sacramento?
I don't know what I was saying. Sorry, Sac to Corpus, not Cali. Okay. That was stupid. I drove in a circle up there in Sacramento. No.
Drove from a state to a city that's in that state.
From Sacramento to Corpus Christi is what I meant to say. It's really early for me, y'all, when we're recording this, just so y'all know. But it was 2 weeks on the road, and after the first 3 or 4 days of trying to get it all in my fitness pal, I was like, fuck it. I'll be okay. It's only a week. And at the end of the week, literally still nothing happened. And I was like, oh, okay. So now on occasion, sometimes if I need to go a full week, if I'm not a complete asshole about it, nothing's really going to happen. And so that's just kind of how, my everything has been going. And now to where, again, I feel like now, shit, every week, or I'd say twice a week, I'm like, I just want a big ass burger and nothing happens, because I know the other days are decently controlled and I'm not stupid about it. Yeah. I don't know. So that's all, is just finding ways to test myself. And there's a few times where shit does happen. And then I know, okay, you can go out and enjoy yourself, but when you go out, Brandon's sister's wedding, and I had 6 Ritas and 3 pieces of cake, I was like, now I'm heavy, and I get it now. But it's knowing, and then from those you learn how long does it take for that to go away if I continue to get back on the normal eating. And it's okay, I know if I do something really stupid, I probably shouldn't weigh in for the next 5 days and eat normal, and then I'll be back to where I don't feel like a piece of shit. And so I think that's it.
It's not. It's sometimes like even after your season's over and we're trying to get you away from tracking all the things, sometimes it's not a bad idea to track these things.
Yeah.
Because then it gives you that reassurance, like, oh, you can see your spreadsheet and go, okay, yeah, I had a shitty day here or there, but look, my weight's down a week later. I'm fine.
Yeah.
Doing the same. So sometimes if like as a first time competitor or even second time competitor, it's not a bad idea to try to track prolonged period of time after, to collect your own personal data, so it gives you that reassurance.
Right.
So now it's like, now you know, like, okay, I don't have to go off generalizations. Now I have my own shit right here that I can go off of. And he was really good at that, but my brother. My brother used to track every freaking thing, and that's why he's a machine now, because he knows how well his body ticks.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not a bad idea.
I think that's a great point. Yeah, it's a great point, because your in-season body is in a very different state than your off-season body. And so knowing yourself in both of those scenarios, I think, is really useful. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so if you track once or twice after 1 or 2 seasons, then you have some type of data for yourself to go off of, you know, instead of relying on like just the broad generalizations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Your data is always the most important data.
So that's why we got to look at like guys like Marshall Johnson and Philip Ricardo Jr. It's like they do things we're like scratching our heads at. We're like, well, shit, they got years and years of keeping their own data. They know how their bodies tick.
Right. And not only that, how their brains tick. Because we've talked about a lot of shit that doesn't make sense on paper, but it's just how we heal, how we deal with things, how we rationalize things. And just because, like, there's shit that I do that I know is stupid and doesn't make sense, but it makes me feel good. Yeah. And that in itself, having a calm brain that is satisfied by knowing certain things, is valuable to me. And I'm glad that I recognize, or it's good as a coach that I recognize that there's some shit I do that has no benefit besides, like, it makes me feel better. So there's some things that obviously I'll be like, hey, this worked for me, client, maybe try this. But there's other things that I'm like, hey, look, this worked for me, but I'm not gonna tell my clients about it because it's stupid. Or be like, hey, here's something that's helped me feel better. There really is no reason for it other than it makes me feel better. See if it makes you feel better, and if not, forget I said it. And so I think that's important for coaches too, to not always impose. I've talked about a lot of anecdotal things, but I really try to look inward and, like, is this actually useful, or is it just useful for me because I'm a neurotic, crazy person? So that's all.
Yeah, you got to trick yourself into doing the right thing sometimes, you know? Yeah. We're not just robots, we're input and output, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Y'all, this was a great one. I think I'm done with it. Are y'all good?
So good.
Eric's yawning.
I know. So let's I guess end the podcast since Eric needs
just
to
getting more oxygen. Getting some more oxygen. It's just
for future burps, so they can be more.
I was doing.
I want to hear
full body.
The science behind yawning. Go for it.
You're basically just a little deprived of oxygen, so you're taking a big deep breath and just replenish that stuff.
Okay. On that note, thanks for talking to me, y'all. See you guys.
Cool.
Bye.